We now start on class number 3, Life After Death. As we are all perfectly well aware in the Occident, there is a considerable amount of fear towards this process we call death. Whether this is the product of the wrong teachings of some religions, who have identified a human being with his body, with his physical body, I don't know. It's not my job to judge anything. But it is very clear that if you tell anybody that when defining a human being, that it is a body with a soul, and the body dies, the individual will think that the one dying is him. This is inevitable. So, fortunately we have other type of, religious ideas concerning death coming from other areas of the world, specifically in this case the Orient, where people die very peacefully, even happily sometimes. They understand that death is not the end of anything except the physical body. The physical body has been set up, organized by nature, so as to last only a certain amount of time. It requires an enormous amount of energy to move because it's very dense, it's very heavy. Hence the amount of energy to require to move it, cannot last forever. It has been conceived to last approximately between 70 or 80 years, maybe even more, if you haven't taken good care of your body. Very few people take good care of their body. They know nothing about taking care of their body properly to begin with. They set up the body with a number of addictions which are very deleterious for the physical frame, things that are not appropriate, and the body will last less than, say, 60, 50 years sometimes. The normal duration should be anywhere between 70 and 80 years old, more or less. That's what should be the normal thing, if you have taken reasonable care of the vehicle. But once the vehicle stops functioning, we don't stop functioning. So there's nothing to be afraid about. The only thing that we may consider traumatic and difficult to deal with is the fact that there's a separation from our loved ones. This is of course painful and difficult. When you lose a son, or you lose your parents, or you lose your dear ones, even the closest friends that you might have, the tendency is to feel very despondent and very unhappy. Essentially why? Because we are essentially selfish persons. We are not crying and lamenting for the individual who left. We are crying for ourselves, for what we consider to be a personal loss. Not a very good idea. Not a very good idea at all. There is nothing to be lost in this particular case. To begin with, what we are told, in Oriental philosophies in general, is that being that the world is ruled by the law of love, the whole universe is, ruled by the law of love. When there is a strong feeling of love among people, even if they're not relatives, but there is a sincere affection that somehow unites them, a unity of purpose, sometimes a great deal of affinity in different fields and so on, that sort of unites them very much during a lifetime. It doesn't have to be a personal relationship. It doesn't have to be your wife or your husband, but it can be, a wonderful friendship. Friendship is a wonderful thing because, we choose our friends. We don't choose our relatives, but our friends, we choose them. Therefore, if an affection is unfolded, developed, which is sincere and profound, it has enormous value. It is the sort of a prelude to the fraternity of mankind. Fraternity starts with friendship. It's a very important thing. A little digression here to explain that, of course, there will be some degree of discomfort and pain when we have to lose someone that we love very much. The important thing to remember, though, is that we don't lose him or her. It will be a separation for a while only, because when there is true love, true affection among people, there's a strong bond that forms, that takes place, and it is impossible to break. Therefore, karma will bring them both, again in a situation in which they will meet once more and they will continue in their evolution helping each other. This is what, the prize that's given to us, as a result of the recognition of a friendship which is, based in love, which is the most important thing, the most important force in the universe. As a matter of fact, it is the force that moves the universe, is the force of love. This love not as a feeling, as we human beings in our present state of evolvement think of it. This love, this universal love, is something much deeper than that. It gives us everything, asking for nothing in exchange. It gives us a whole infrastructure with all the laws and resources which will allow us the unfoldment of our divine consciousness. Our gratitude along those lines then has to be unbounded. It is really quite remarkable, that we are given this without asking for anything in exchange. But the fact is that there's nothing to be really scared or very lamentable about. The separation will be for just a while. This is an important thing to remember. Karma will bring us together again. So there's an unnecessary thing about the fear of death, uncomfortable as it may be for those who are left behind. Now, as far as the individual, he doesn't feel anything. As a matter of fact, if he is sort of dying out of a very painful disease, it would be an enormous relief, because all he does is to go to sleep, loses consciousness. Consciousness is lost, pain is gone. Now we need to describe exactly what happens after that, if anything. Is there such a thing of life after death? Is there a place where we go and unfold and wake up to consciousness? Is there such a thing? This is the thing that we need to study today. What, if there is such a place, what happens in it? How do we perceive life? What we call life comes to us through our five senses. Five senses, of course, are, the windows of the soul, they call it. It's very poetical, but once you don't have the physical body anymore, you have no senses. Therefore, what are you going to be able to see with, to hear with, to touch with, and so on? This is the question that we need to ask ourselves. Because we are told that, among other things, there is a spiritual world behind this one, the physical one. But the spiritual world, presumably, is immaterial. This being the case, with what are we going to be able to perceive life, and what kind of life can there be that is not or non-material? These are questions which are perfectly legitimate. Occidental religions do not bother to tell us what happens. They don't give us the slightest information about life after death and the viability of the continuance of conscious existence. They just don't tell us anything. Well, they do tell us that if we are good boys and girls and we behave too sinful and behave reasonably properly, we will end up in heaven. Now, we don't, and we have behaved in an abominable way, displaying cruelty and brutality and so on, then we're going to end up in a very unsavory place. We're talking about hell. There's some kind of biped there with horns and a tail and a place of fire and brimstone where people will roast for eternity. What people I don't know. Those people have to do with their bodies. The body's no longer there. The worms are eating it up 6 feet under the ground. So the body's not going anywhere. And the soul, which we are told we have, is non-material. Therefore it cannot burn. When you start thinking about the things that we have been told, especially in Christianity, concerning the life after death, you have to smile. It has the level of fairy tales. It doesn't make absolutely any sense, and it most certainly does anything to improve people's lives in a moral sense. People who proceed in life in the most unsavory manner, they couldn't care less about this idea that they are going to be condemned to hell, and that the devil is going to be there, preaching them with a trident for eternity within the fire of the brimstone and that sort of thing. They just don't believe in that. Nobody in their right mind will believe such nonsense. So, as a dissuasive element to get people to behave properly, it's useless. It just doesn't work, because the idea is childish. And people are not children, they are adults, so they're not going to swallow something like that. There will always be people who will swallow anything. They will not examine what they're told, and they don't even want to bother with it. We all know that. But if you think a little bit, not much thinking is required, really, you realize that something like that, is simply not true. I have asked sometimes people whether they want to go to heaven when they die. Well, they look at me like I'm crazy. Of course I'm going to go to heaven. So then I ask them, what for? Well, they look at me with equal surprise. They say, well, look, it's because it's a place of, beauty and happiness and magnificence and so on. And you're going to be in the presence of God. So I tell them, well, I'm fine. I say, with what are you going to perceive all this grandeur, all these wonderful things, all this blessed type of existence? You'll have no longer a body. Number one. Number two, daily in the planet, we have people disincarnating to the tune of hundreds of thousands on a daily basis. When we studied this presentation, now, it is not the same humanity than it was before. Several people have died in this 10-15 minutes we've been in the lesson. Daily, we have a huge amount of people which are disincarnating, leaving the physical body. And we have a similar amount of people coming in, being born. It's like, a revolving door that's going on all the time. So, if there was such a thing as a God sitting on a throne somewhere in space, or out of the universe, somewhere in the cosmos or whatever, which is another absurd idea, but let's assume that it is the case. Now, the line in front of the divine throne is going to be particularly long, because there's a lot of people involved. And once you get towards the divine presence, and there will be time to hide and then keep going, because the guy behind you is pushing. My brothers and sisters, it's very important that once and for all we abandon childish ideas that don't make any sense concerning things as important, as transcendental as life after death. It's fundamental that we have ideas clear on what it is reasonable to assume that will happen once we have left our physical body. Because it's too old, it's sick, infirm, or whatever, and we have to leave it. This is something that will never stop. It's a fact of life. It's inevitable. It's very essential, consequently, to have reasonable and clear ideas as to what really happens once we lose this flesh vehicle. Very important. To this extent, we need now to remind ourselves of the idea, which we have posited throughout the first lessons, of the existence of 7 types of matter in the universe. This being the case, the Earth, as a planet, like all other planets, and like all suns, and like everything else that exists in the universe, has 7 counterparts. In other words, we are only aware of the physical sphere, as we explained before, because that's what our physical body can see, to a sense. But we have 6 more spheres coexisting and interpenetrating the physical. We're talking about the astral sphere, which is the next one, reaching approximately 225,000 miles in space, more or less the orbit of the moon, more or less. And then, of course, it turns into the mental sphere. And then the 4 more spheres, who have the nomenclature used in this particular philosophy, which is Buddhic, atomic, monadic, and divine. These are the names given to the other 4 spheres. Now, this being the case, and this is the case, in fact, we have already a place. When we recover our consciousness, because as I said before, dying is going to sleep. When we lose consciousness completely, because you lose the vehicle that provides the consciousness, there is a period of complete unconsciousness that goes on, just asleep. Same thing as going to sleep like we do every night. The only thing is that we're not going to wake up in the same place, in the same body. That's for sure. But once we wake up, we will find ourselves in the astral sphere of the world. Why? simply because consciousness, according to certain universal laws, will always focus on the densest body, on the densest one of our vehicles, always. Lost the physical, which is the densest, now the consciousness will shift to the astral body. The astral body is made of, you studied it in the second lesson, is made of astral matter. It's made of matter of that sphere. Hence, we're going to wake up there precisely in a place we can perceive with no problem because it's made of matter of that particular place. The astral body, which is an ovoid during the physical incarnation, now assumes the shape of the physical body as it was in this last incarnation. The shape it takes and the aspect it will present is pretty much in line with the mental image the individual has of himself. If it is a person which is kind of old in his ways, kind of, they appear sometimes older than his own age when he's incarnated and that sort of thing, he is going to look old on the other side, I would call it, in the astral world. But if a person is, say, died at 70 or 80 years old and has a youthful attitude, a young mentality, so to speak, there's nothing, very old in the way he thinks and that sort of thing. He feels young and everything, despite his body being old. In the afterworld, he will look young. He will look like he was when he was 20 or 30 years old. Because what happens with astral matter is that it sort of accommodates itself to thoughts, what we're thinking. Why is that possible? Because astral matter is very subtle. Therefore, the part of the mind can move it easily. Remember that we still have our mental body. We still have our mind with us. This is an important thing to remember. Now we are in the astral body, which interpenetrates the mental body as well. So therefore we can think and we have the same attitude that we had when we were in physical incarnation. Those two vehicles are still working together. No problem there. Now, the thing is, people sometimes ask, suppose we're talking about a person which has really misbehaved, has a criminal attitude, is a very cruel, brutal individual, has done a lot of damage, rules his life by hatred and that sort of thing. Well, what's going to happen to him? Since there is no hell with fire and brimstone and some ridiculous biped presiding over the whole thing, what's going to happen to some people who misbehave, which act in such an unsavory way? This is one thing that people will ask us, or the normal. Well, what we are told is, of course, that each one of the levels of the sphere, of all the spheres of the earth, has 7 sub-levels, of sub-spheres, if you want to call it. Okay? In the case of the physical world, we have solids, liquids, and gaseous, and then 4 ethers. Those are the 7 subdivisions of the physical sphere. We know that we cannot see 60% of it. We cannot see the ethereal part. But still, the ethers represent physical matter, technically speaking. So we have solids, liquids, gaseous, and then 4 ethers, which we already studied in the past lesson. And we will, go in more detail about it in the second phase of the course when we study the etheric double and in more detail. Now, the astral world, as I said before, the astral sphere of the earth has 7 sub-levels as well. The lowest, the one that vibrates as the lowest, and the one more identified with grossness, is contained inside of the physical globe of the earth. And it is a very dark, unpleasant, unsavory place. Something really horrible. It's populated by people which are full of hatred, and they end up there. Not because anybody sends them there. Try to remember that in this world, there isn't a moral governor of the universe, which is sending people to hell when they misbehave, and to heaven when they behave properly. There's no moral governor of the universe passing judgment on us, and then punishing, or rewarding us, depending on how we behave. Because the idea is absurd. On top of that, there's no need for such a thing, because there are laws. These laws are perfect. They rule splendidly well a process of evolution with no problem whatsoever. There are no mishappenings with these laws. They are really perfect. So therefore we'll be given exactly what we deserve. If it is painful, it's not because the law is going to punish us. The law is something impersonal. Therefore it has no designs of that type. It passes no judgment. It is based on cause and effect. If we have created pain and difficulty for others, if we have created, all kind of havoc, that's exactly what the law will give us back. It's cause and effect. The law of karma, which we will study in lesson number 5, will show that in more detail. That is the law that rules our advancement. We get exactly what we deserve depending on what we have done. Now, this, determines of the 7 sub-levels of the astral world, the one where we're going to wake up our consciousness. Depending on how we have behaved, we set up a certain vibratory rate. Remember that each one of the sub-levels of all the spheres have a different atomic rate of vibration. Each one of the 7 sub-levels has a different rate of vibration. The lowest type, the one identified with gross things, with criminality and that sort of thing, vibrates very slow. Consequently, it identifies very much with everything that is dense and mineral. That's why it is contained within the planet. If an individual is a criminal and he has acted criminally and created a lot of problems and pain for everyone else, he has a vibration, a vibratory tone, which we all human beings have, which is in line with the vibratory rate of that particular sub-level of the astral world. Now, this being the case, his consciousness will shift, and focus on that particular area, which is very unpleasant. But that's what he wanted for himself. He himself has sent himself there. No one is there to send him anywhere. I repeat, there's no one in the universe punishing us for bad behavior. That doesn't exist. And God will never punish anyone for anything. We are imperfect. Coming from perfection, absolute perfection, as we are told that God is, it just makes no sense that he should, eventually, would have to foot the bill for bad behavior. And have to respond to him for bad behavior, which is a result of being imperfect. And who placed us in this world? God did. It placed us imperfect, and then it will punish us because of our imperfections. None of that makes any sense, as you can easily imagine. God does not get involved with us in this process. There is no need for it. We set up our destiny. We set up the conditions, which are post-mortem, when we die. The conditions we're going to find will replicate the type of life we had during the incarnation. If you come to think of it, you realize it's very fair. It should be that way. We have a choice of living a clean, appropriate life, setting up a right, adequate, vibratory tone for ourselves. Once that appropriate vibratory tone is a part of ourselves, when we lose our physical body, the spiritual ego that we are, which has that type of vibratory tone, will drift towards that sub-level of the astral world with which it has affinity in vibratory terms. Each one gets exactly what one has been working for. Let's give examples to illustrate this idea. Let's assume that someone has made the great mistake of becoming an alcoholic. That is considered to be a disease. But it starts, as an addiction, as a bad idea, which can very easily be stopped if we want to. But we don't want to. We want the high that gives us alcohol, so we start drinking and drinking and drinking. This individual started drinking at 20. By 50, he has, liver cirrhosis, and he disincarnates. He was supposed to live until 80 maybe, but he ruined his physical body with all the drinking. Now he's lost that physical body and he finds himself in the astral world, waking up in the astral consciousness. Now he's very confused because the perception of the astral world is somewhat different than that from the physical world. The astral body has no senses. It can see with the totality of the vehicle. It can hear with the totality of the vehicle. It doesn't require senses. And the individual is very disconcerted when he wakes up and he finds that he can see peripherally 360 degrees simultaneously. He can see frontwards, backwards, and sideways because he's not using eyes. His astral body has taken the shape of what used to be the physical body during the incarnation. And when somebody sees him in the astral body, he will see the eyes and everything. It's exactly the same thing. But he's not seeing through the eyes, he's seeing through the whole vehicle. That's the characteristic of the astral body. It will allow an individual, to perceive life without senses. It has them all incorporated in his whole consciousness. So the individual is very disconcerted by that. He doesn't know what to think. Most of the people who know nothing about these ideas and who know nothing about the astral world or anything of that sort, or who are simply atheists, are very confused when they realize that they feel more alive than ever. Because now life is manifesting through a means of matter which is much less dense, which is much more subtle. And life is energy. So energy moving through a much less denser element will be much more alive, will be much more intense. So the individual finds himself more alive than ever. And this is a bad surprise for those who commit suicide, which is something that should never, ever do. There's no excuse for that, and the karmic consequences are very, very drastic. So anybody who's thinking about that because of problems, or because it's bored with life, and that sort of like physical life and so on, better abandon the idea. The price is really too difficult, too painful. And it will, somehow interfere with the individual, or the advancement, normal advancement of the individual, something that also should be avoided at all costs. Now, the individual now finds himself in this world, as I said before, in which things appear very similar to the earth. He will see the mountains and the trees and the streets and the houses. He will see everything, just like in the physical world. The point is, he will, as I said before, see things in every direction at the same time. He is a little confused by this change. When this incarnation has taken place in an accident of some kind, and it is a really abrupt thing to happen, the individual still thinks he's alive, but he doesn't understand the differences that he's observing. So somebody has to come over, and there are those, whose job is to help people with this incarnate. Who come over, they're called the invisible helpers. And comes over and relaxes the individual, tell him, listen, you have left the physical world, now you are in the astral sphere of the planet. And therefore, it's a different story. For that, so some of them, it's very difficult to understand. You say, well, what do you mean I'm dead? I cannot be dead. Say, no, you're not dead, you cannot die, but your physical body died. There was an accident and you lost it. But now you're alive. This shows you that you're not your physical body. So you're alive now, and so on. And these things are different here. You're going to take some time before you can somehow start to getting used to these new conditions of existence. Now, one thing that happens when the individual is alive, the astral body, which is, as I said, like a ovoid, which we showed in the previous lesson, has astral matter of practically of the 7 sub-levels of the astral world. In the case of people which are normal, which are not criminals and that sort of thing, it will be minimal or non-existent on the 7th type, or even the 6th type of matter, or of sub-level. Normally it's about from the 5th sub-levels, maximum 5th sub-levels, that the individual will have, all mixed in his astral body during the incarnation. This is why sometimes people react emotionally in a proper way and sometimes in an improper way, because it's a matter of 6 levels and some of the lower ones are not very appropriate. So therefore that will identify with lower type of reactions. And the 2 even lower ones, one is, we are told, in the crust of the earth, and the other one's inside of the earth. So those levels are pretty dense, and represent a pretty low type of vibration. And they are visited, in the case of the 7th one, the lowest one, by criminals, people who enjoy cruelty, brutality, which have done enormous damage and so on, or terrible vices, terrible addictions and everything very gross, very, very basic. They are identified with that type of vibration, astral vibration, which is contained inside of the physical globe. Now people which are very attached to their material possessions, enterprise people who have a factory and that sort of thing, for instance, which are very attached to anything that has to do, or attached to people as well, people that have family or whatever, will wake up in the crust. They were still very, very attracted to the physical part. That's where they left what they loved, what they wanted. So therefore they're still very attracted to that. Now, but when the individual dies, when the physical body dies, all that mixed matter becomes arranged in shape, in layers, in layers, What happens is the following. We human beings, when we are children, bring about something called elemental essence into our astral body. This forms like an entity there, which is like a little parasite called the astral elemental. As I said, it's made of astral matter, astral elemental essence, which is a type of immature, astral matter. Now, it becomes, when the child goes into tantrums and that sort of thing, this violent behavior attracts this type of matter, and this entity starts taking shape within the astral of the individual, and it will be with him until the end of his life. The trouble is when the individual is continually giving in to improper behavior, not running his emotions properly, and that sort of thing, that elemental becomes stronger, and it starts governing the astral world and the life of the individual. It is, in esoteric terms, is known as an artificial elemental. Elementals are something we will study when we study the Devi Kingdom in the second part of the course. But they are produced by nature. But in this particular case, we are the ones who produce it, through tantrums and that sort of thing, strong vibrations, of a lower nature, with which that type of immature matter, which is elemental essence, somehow becomes stronger, and the individual, is having this parasite inside of his astral body. He doesn't even know exists. Now, when the death of the physical body takes place, the astral elemental feels the change, and then in order to protect himself, he arranges the matter of the astral body in layers, placing the densest one on the outside, so as to protect himself. This is the thing. Now that outer layer is the one that determines the sub-level of the astral world where we will wake up and recover consciousness. Let's assume the case of a person with a drinker, for instance, as I said before. Yes, he's an alcoholic, and he's disincarnates at 50. Okay, now he's disoriented, so the first thing he will think of is a drink. To his enormous surprise, the moment he thinks of the drink materializes right in front of him. Because astral matter, as I said before, moves, easily. Any mind can move it, and you can shape anything you want to, with just thinking about it, because it's very subtle. Physical matter, we cannot do that because it's very heavy, but astral matter, you can, anybody can. So the individual thinks of a drink and he's got it in front of him, his favorite drink, right in front of him. So he drinks it. He feels nothing. Why? Because the element to feel with was the astral body, the physical body, through his nervous system. He no longer has it. It died on him. Therefore, he thinks he doesn't know that. Or he thinks it's just more whiskey. Now he was a large glass. Some of the investigations done by clairvoyants in the astral world, they saw something that is amazing, and it's even funny to see people creating real, how would I call it? They really set up in their mind barrels of whiskey, and they jump inside, desperate to feel the high of alcohol. Now, as we all know, when we have a habit, some kind of an addiction that is not, fed by falling into it, what happens is that loses energy, and gradually that habit disappears. The best thing to get rid of a habit is not to indulge in it. Once we don't indulge in it, the energy is gone, and the habit will disappear. So that first layer sort of disappears completely. Now, the moment that happens, the individual will move to the next sub-level because his vibratory rate will increase. He will then move into the next sub-level of the astral world. One by one, the layers are gone. They start disappearing. When the energies that seem to animate them also disappear. Now the individual is left only in the three top sub-levels of the astral world. They are connected to emotions which are lofty and noble and appropriate, philanthropy, music, the arts, and everything that has to do with emotional aspects which are of a lofty nature. And that's a different story. But they're still in this astral body. Those are just the sub-levels of matter that he still has with him. But what has happened before, when those layers kept falling down, was some kind of catharsis, some kind of purification process that is taking place continually. Cleansing the astral body of the individual. Why? Because it is important that the rate of vibration of the individual will pick up, will increase. Why? Because once we end up with an astral purification period, we must be ready to enter the mental sphere of the earth. We call the mental world, known also in theosophy as Devachan. The word Devachan means Sanskrit word that means more or less place of the angels. Now, it is not only, just like the astral world, a place, it is pretty much a state. Why is it that we enter certain sub-levels in the astral world, as we have just explained? Because we are in state, we are in harmony with that particular vibratory rate of those sub-levels, which indicates, of course, that we are in a state that allows us to be conscious of those sub-levels. In the mental world, that is even emphasized. It is pretty much a state that it is a place. That it is a place as well because it's a sphere of the earth. So it is a place. Now, suppose we were able to, because we just want to do it, grab someone and place him, someone who has a lower vibratory rate and whose degree of advancement in his own personal evolution is not very pronounced. And we place him in the mental world, directly from the physical world. He will not see anything. He will just see a white mist around himself and won't see anything. Because, I remember, it's not only a place, it's also a state. His own state of consciousness is still not in line with that of the mental world. Therefore, it's useless to place him there, because he will not be able to experience it. Nobody will know what it is. This happens when the individual doesn't have many incarnations. We have to remove the idea that this world is populated by good people and bad people. We have people with good behavior and people with bad behavior. Yes, that we have. But what happens with people with bad behavior is that the antisocial way of life is due to the fact that they have less incarnations. They're more immature, spiritually speaking. Their spiritual ego has much less control over the personality than it has when the individual has more incarnations and is more advanced. That's why it's very important not to pass judgment, on anyone. We are all in the level where we should be according to the number of incarnations that we have. If we have used them wisely, which is usually not the case, we will probably have, a higher state of consciousness. Now when we disincarnate, the consciousness will appear in the astral world, in one of the highest of levels. We won't even be conscious of the lower sub-levels, because we have set for us that type of vibratory rate, and therefore we will be then, conscious of that particular part. Same thing happens when you are reasonably well advanced, and then you have access to the mental world, to the Devachan. Also there you have 7 sub-levels, remember that. The 4 lower ones, the concrete mental worlds known also, that's the one called Devachan, is connected with a number of things, that we should be aware of. So in the graphic we're going to show now, we will explain that. This graphic that you see now we already showed in the past lessons, so you by now are familiar with it. It describes the 7 types of matter of the universe. The 7, in other words, spheres of the Earth, which are here depicted, in a graphical way. We have placed them in a linear fashion so as to make it clear, that's all. Now, the individual has lost his physical world, which was made of solids, liquids, and gaseous. It also lost the etheric double. In the process of disincarnation, what has been observed by clairvoyants is that what they see is the moment that the heart stops and the brain stops emitting wave within about 3 or 4 minutes after that, what they see is the ego, spiritual ego, the soul coming like a ball of light coming out of the physical body with the astral body and the mental body and 2 of the ethers, the reflecting ether and the luminic ether. These are the ethers. To make this even more clear, what we're going to do in this diagram, we're going to reduce this diagram to the 3 levels where the evolution of mankind takes place. This is where we move incarnating and disincarnating over the bodies that we require to have in order to express consciousness at mental, emotional, and physical level. Okay, so we're going to show the next graphic now to just show this part in a more clear fashion. This next graphic will show the 3 lower levels of the previous graphic that you saw a moment ago. Okay? So to make it more clear and show more clearly the sub-levels. The sub-levels are here set up in such a way. The physical world, essentially, shows the gases, liquids, and solids. This is what we see. This is what we are aware of. The chemical, the vital, and luminic, and reflecting ethers is a part of the physical world, that we do not see. It's the etheric region. This is a dense region, this is the etheric region. But this whole thing is the physical world. Okay, important to remember that. We have lost this because the moment the individual disincarnates, the ego is seen coming out of the body with the mental and the astral worlds, and 2 of the ethers, the luminic and the reflecting. The other 2 ethers, the vital and the chemical, remain decomposing with the body. The silver cord, which is an etheric line that unites the lower ethers with the higher ethers, disintegrates as well, so as to release the ego completely, and the other vehicles as well. Then eventually, of course, the other 2 ethers, the luminic and the reflecting, eventually also disintegrate. The moment that happens, the individual wakes up from the sleep created by what we call the death process, and wakes up in the level of the astral world where his consciousness is vibrating in line with, fundamentally, this is the idea. Okay, if this, we're talking about anti-souls, young souls, we're talking about people with very few incarnations and then behave anti-socially, in a criminal manner, cruel manner, brutal manner, whatever. This sub-level of the astral world represents the lower astral region. And in this sub-level, together with the Earth's abstractions, which is a 6th sub-level, are people which are immature spiritually, and therefore they are very attached to everything that is gross and dense. And this is why consciousness is recovered here. None of the 2 levels are present at all. To begin with, this one is the one that's inside of the planet, so it's very unpleasant, dark and nasty, and full of people which are like them, criminal and that sort of thing. So it's really a hellish type of situation, maybe even worse than you had fire and brimstone, or the guy with the tail of the horn. So, what we have now, and people, Earth attractions are represented by the 6th sub-level. People who are very much attached to things which are physical, for many reasons, even emotional reasons, will end up recover consciousness in this sub-level here. The average individual who's not that attached to anything though, who's not a criminal, ends up usually waking up in the 5th sub-level, where the average individual is supposed to wake up, so to speak. Usually atheists, but which live a very clean, decent life, a proper life, even when they don't believe in God or anything of that sort, but they have lived a decent life. They've never done damage, they help when they can, and so on. End up usually in the 4th sub-level. which is what atheists belong usually. It has to do, they have no spiritual inclinations, and they've been thinking all the time that the only thing that exists is physical matter, that sort of thing. They end up here. Not a bad place, but very boring, we're told. They move around like in a mist, saying, when is this going to end? Very boring place. This is what we're told. When we're talking about individuals which are more advanced and which are more spiritual and who have more incarnations, so therefore they're more mature individually, they end up in the third sub-level, where advanced individuals are, identified with. Their consciousness is vibrating at the level of this. Then, when we're talking about now the arts, and things that have to do with the lofty aspects of life, the noble aspects of life, these two upper levels are identified with. There's a higher astral, region, which is identified with number 1 and number 2 of the sub-levels of the astral world. Essentially, these two are the ones connected with that. So, when an individual disincarnates and loses his physical body and his etheric double, and when he goes to sleep, literally. It just his consciousness appears along those lines. He's completely asleep. He will go asleep through all these sub-levels and wake up in the sub-level with which he is in consonance with, vibrating with. Okay, so this is the way it works. In the meantime, this level also, this type of matter will also disintegrate, and so will this one. And the individual will lose his astral body. That's the second death that takes place. Remember that these vehicles are intended to last a while, for time. Eventually, they have to disappear. So the astral body is no exception. It will disappear. Once this has happened, and these two sub-levels that still remain of matter, which still remain, in the astral body disintegrate, the individual goes to sleep again. Now, it will wake up, depending on his own degree of advancement, in one of the sub-levels of the mental world. This is a mental world, this is a lower mental world, the 4 lower subdivisions. They have to do with archetypes of forms, vitality, archetypes of emotional desire, and the learned things that turn into faculties. This is particularly important because this 4th sub-level is the one where we somehow synthesize everything that we have learned, turn it into faculty, so as not to lose it. If once this is done, then the individual again loses his mental body, essentially. And he enters, once he loses his, which he covers, the lower mental covers the Vachan, all this is a concrete mental body as known, this area here. Once he loses this one, he goes to disintegrate, like the others. Again he goes to sleep. Then he wakes up in the upper part of the mental world, the home of the spiritual ego, the higher mental, or causal as is known. Why is this causal called? Because the causal body that we have is the only body that will not disintegrate. It was stated in the last lesson. All these vehicles made of this type of matter disintegrate, one after the other. Not the causal, however. The causal body remains, it becomes bigger, brighter, more full of color and size and energy and beauty as we go on life after life, depositing in it the things that we are learning that have been synthesized here, and have become faculty. The reason why it's called causal is because those faculties will be the causes that will be effects in the next incarnation. From this, you can derive something very important. There are no such thing as the gifts of God. There's no such a thing as a God giving gifts to some people and denying them to others, because the idea is ridiculous. There's nothing ridiculous in these teachings. We go by common sense. God doesn't get involved in our advancement. Our advancement is our business. It is predicated on our willpower, our determination. We have been given the information, the means, and the energies to get this done. And we have to move on ourselves. We cannot go around thinking of somebody's going to be giving us things. In the universe, nobody gives anyone anything. There's not an individual. There is no some kind of moral governor of the universe dispensing gifts, or punishments or anything of that sort. That, my brothers and sisters, that does not exist. It has never been proven as an existence. This is a commonsensical type of philosophy, what I'm sharing with you guys now. And common sense will tell us the whole thing is in our hands. We have been given the information and the means. We have been given the planet and its resources. We have been given the vehicles, one to think with, another to feel with, and another to act. And nobody is charging us for that. Nature is taking care of that. For us to utilize these vehicles, these resources properly, well, all it takes is determination and understanding. For the ignorant, nothing is ever going to happen, and we'll always be thinking of things that don't make sense. But once you get the information, and once you ponder it, and examine it, and realize that it makes every sense, it's useful to keep it as a working hypothesis. That's what we can do in courses like this one. Okay. So the individual now has reached that particular point in which it is like vacation. It's like the blessings of the soul. A very high place, wonderful place, and what we're told is that it is that particular area where we meet our loved ones. The spiritual egos, souls of our loved ones are here, and in this particular area. So when we meet them, we find the best of them always there. If they have incarnated, that's another story, but sometimes they have not incarnated yet, so there will be a joyous reunion with those who we really love, and who love us. And it's a wonderful experience. We are told that, if you are asking in your minds, how long is this going to last? It's a perfectly legitimate question to ask. What we're told is that the more spiritual the person is, the less attached to the dense parts of the system, the physical world and that sort of thing, the longer his devachanic process will take place, and the causal process as well. It will be the longer. Some people can have 2,000 years before they incarnate again. But there are many people who, because of their lack of development, do not go into the mental world. They just reach up here, more or less, and from there they incarnate again. But they cannot, enter the mental world. Not because it's an exclusive club for goody-goodies. That's not the point. It's simply that they do not have the vibratory level that allows them to perceive the mental world. And even, as I said before, even when you put them there, they will not feel anything. They will see just a white mist around themselves, and that'll be it. So we have to wait until incarnations go by and the consciousness unfolds, and eventually they will be able to perceive the mental world, which is, a wonderful place. There's no worries about that. It's marvelous. Now, in the process of death, there's a problem that takes place, which is very serious. If we accept the idea of reincarnation and the many lives we have to live, it's very, very important to remember that there are resources to make sure that we do not lose what we have learned. When we lose the physical body, made of this matter, we lose the brain and the memory of the brain. When we lose the astral body, we also lose our emotional memory. Memories have to do with emotions. The astral one are also gone because the vehicle is gone. And then the mental world as well, also the mental body will lose all remembrances because it just disintegrates. So the problem would be then, how can a human being harbor, keep the things that he or she has learned, for the next incarnations? You cannot lose what you've learned, what you have unfolded, developed. What we are told is that nature very wisely keeps one atom of each one of the bodies. One physical atom, one etheric atom, one astral atom, and one mental atom. They are all together. Just like the bodies are together, those atoms are also together. And they represent, the memory of the last life and all the lives before. They are like, so the seed is called the seed atom, which is really pretty much like a cosmic ID, if you will call it, where our karma is, where our memories from past lives is, where the faculties that we have unfolded are present, where the things that we still have not unfolded, are also present in terms of the need to unfold them again, unfold them one day, and that sort of thing. So that's the way nature makes sure that our memories of past lives and what we have achieved and learned will not be lost. This is an important thing. Charles Leadbeater, who was a great clairvoyant, explained that when he observed this process and checked on the causal bodies of individuals, he noticed there was like a golden cocoon within each causal body. And he asked the master, what was that? And the master told him that is a cocoon where the individual keeps his seed atoms. So not to lose them, because they will be the root from which the next vehicles will stem up, will come up again. At some point, when karma, somehow rings, the seed atom, the mental seed atom, starts to vibrate to bring matter for a new mental body. Then the astral atom vibrates in order to bring matter from, for the next astral body. Then another one for the etheric double. Then there are devas who work, on the formation of the etheric double mold, which will be used for the construction of the fetus of the next body that the individual, physical body that the individual will have. Another problem is then arisen in that particular case, because the idea is that because the body is so dense, it has to be brought forth by sexual contact between the parents. Now the problem is this: the male delivers the sperm and the female delivers the ovum. When both get together, what you have is something called in biology the zygote. This is the name given to it, in biology, which is the combination of both the ovum, as I said before, and the which is a combination of the ovum and the sperm. Essentially, that's what it is. Now, if it's left that way, the baby will be a clone of the parents, both physically, emotionally, intellectually, and everything. That's not the idea. The idea is to provide for that individual who's going to incarnate, to provide a vehicle that will represent himself, everything he knows, everything he still doesn't know, his character, his ways, his morals, everything that he brings from past lives. That is the point. That's it. So, in order for that to happen, a mental diva, what happens, places a physical seed atom in the zygote. When that happens, you're given that seed atom, that zygote, you're given the identity of the individual who's going to incarnate. That double cell will now spread and form the fetal body, that will be growing up for 9 months until eventually the baby will be born. But that body will be representing the individual, not the parents. And this is the reason why most of the time children do not look like their parents, neither mentally, emotionally, or physically. There are families when you have 6 or 7 children, even more sometimes, they are very different among themselves, coming from the same parents. Why? Because each one brings his own baggage of past lives. And that's the way it should be. Okay, this is an important thing to remember. Sometimes you get from parents that are not very bright children, from parents who are very artistic children that have no artistic quality whatsoever. You find these differences because, as I said before, we bring with ourselves what we have into the incarnation. This is the important thing to say. Most important thing, the individual cannot lose his identity, who he is, what he's done, and what he still hasn't done. This he has to carry one life to the other one. And this mechanism with the seed atom, and the zygote permits that to happen. Another thing that happens, which is very interesting in this particular case, is the question of DNA, which is an important thing to consider, because people think that DNA, is something that has to do with, we are the product of DNA only, and that sort of thing. And they forget that sometimes children are very different from their parents, as I said before. So what happened to the DNA? El asunto de... I'm sorry. In the matter of the DNA and our presumed ancestry, how we inherit, tendencies and virtues or mistakes or whatever, There's an explanation for that, because as we are all very well aware, in many occasions children are very different from their parents. They are because of what we said before, that they bring their own baggage with themselves. They bring their own karma, their own circumstances, their own abilities, and so on. So therefore that must be kept. Nature has to have the way of making sure that when we incarnate, we will be in a body that will be able to express exactly what we are, not what the parents are. This is an important thing. Now, what we see from the biological standpoint here, this is a yeah. What we have here is a human chromosome, as you can see there. Each human being, each human body rather, has 46 chromosomes, in each cell. Attached to the chromosomes that we have, are the genes, here indicated in red, like little balls. Now, the seed atom of the individual, which is here, contains the karma of the individual, remember that. And according to that karma, it will only activate certain chromosomes, certain genes, okay, this one. And leaving some inactive, what they call in biology recessive genes. The ones that are inactive here in white, it's because they represent things that the individual does not have and will not have, because karma will stop it or because the parents don't have it. Sometimes the DNA from the parents coincides pretty much with that of the incarnating person. Yeah, it happens, so this will be very similar. But fundamentally and usually, children are very different from their parents, even physically very different. Sometimes when you have a family of 7 or 8 children, among themselves they are very different, because each one brings with its own. And what happens with them, what happens to us, is according to our genes. And the genes will be, activated according to the seed atom, which has the karma of the individual and his characteristics. So this is the reason why, when an individual incarnates, the nature has a method, a system to ensure that the body he will be using in this coming incarnation will be one that represents him in every conceivable aspect, even moral aspects also as well. This somehow completes the process of disincarnation and incarnation of the individual. Recapitulating a little bit. First, recapitulando.
Estamos cansados.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's recapitulate in terms of what we have said before. Okay. First goes the physical body, as we're well aware. Then the etheric double disintegrates. Once the etheric double disintegrates, the individual, recovers consciousness in the astral sphere, in his astral body, in the sub-level of the sphere, which corresponds to his own vibratory level. Once that area, that part is concluded with the cleansing of the individual, the vibration goes up and the individual enters the mental world. In the mental world, he will synthesize everything that has been learned, into faculty and deposit it into the causal world. This process can take many years for many people. We are told that in between, in the astral world normally, when an individual is an average individual, in between 20 and 40 years the permanence there. But that changes very much with the state of consciousness of the individual and with the degree of attachment to his vices or his addictions of some kind. That could take a long time. The time in this case is measured by physical time, of course, because in the astral world time feels entirely different. But in order to illustrate the idea, we have to use physical time. In between 20 and 40 years for the average individual in the astral world. In the mental world, it can be even more, depending on the degree of advancement of the individual. His spiritual advancement is very, very marked, very important, very considerable. Then it will take a long time, in the mental world before he incarnates again. Whatever brings him back into incarnation essentially is his karma, which will determine the date of being born and the date in which he has to disincarnate. Those things are not in cement. Pretty much it depends on the individual and the manner in which he conducts his life. This is a very important thing. Once he has, lost his mental body, he goes into the causal body, deposits there whatever we have learned, all the things that we have learned, which have been, worked up in the mental body, in the mental world, and now have been set up as faculties in the causal body. This will reflect, of course, in the seed atoms, and in the next incarnation, through the mechanism that we have explained, the individual will have a body that corresponds to his karmic situation, his tendencies, the things he has learned, and the things he still needs to learn. This is a process that ensures, that the reincarnation will not interrupt the learning process that we are involved in our development. There's no need to be afraid by death, consequently. We are immortal. There is nothing in this world, we are told. There's nothing in the universe that can kill us. We are a part of the divinity, and the divinity is immortal, we are told. Therefore, there's no need to be concerned or not to make a big scandal when we have to disincarnate, or when people dear to us do disincarnate. This we have done many times, my brothers, in many occasions. We should be by now used to it. The problem is that we don't remember it, so we think it's happening to us for the first time. It isn't. It's many, many times that we have disincarnated and incarnated again. It is inevitable because we need the necessary time to unfold the divine consciousness which in us is still in seed. In order to unfold it, we will require the time. Hence, incarnation, reincarnation, incarnation and reincarnation again, until we complete our developments. In our next class, we will speak precisely about that, the doctrine of reincarnation. Until then, thank you very much.